Tonight we have Tim Goldstein with us, and he's going to talk a little bit about a topic that he's passionate about and I think is really relevant today. So with that, I'll let you do the rest of the introduction. Thanks, Tim. Oh, you don't have to do that.
I don't need that thing. Get rid of that thing. Don't know what the heck to do with it. Thank you. So I was sitting outside in the parking lot of work and sitting in my car, and I'm holding my phone and I'm shaking and I don't know what the heck to do. And I don't even know what really went on at that point. And I'm trying to think, who should I call? What should I do? And I decide I should probably call my wife. And I'm half hoping that she doesn't even answer the phone. But she answers and says, "Hi, hon." And I go, "I've got bad news. I was just fired." You see, I'm a tech worker like many of the tech workers that you probably work with every day. And especially those ones that when somebody asks you about them, you go, "Well, you know, that's how techies are." That's probably me. And I have Asperger's. So we're going to define a couple terms here because it gets real confusing fast, so we'll go fast. Autism and Asperger's were two separate diseases that have now been combined together into what they call autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. Then you hear these terms of Asperger's, and you might have heard this term of HFA, which is high functioning autism. And what those really are is simply the less challenged, more gifted area in the autism spectrum. Now, autism is thought to be caused by the ways that our brains are shaped and wired, and that causes us to think certain ways, which starts getting into this concept called neurodiversity. So neurodiversity is the idea that the brain and how it's wired and how it's shaped and put together should vary as much as the rest of our bodies vary. We tend not to think of it that way. But in neurodiversity, what they say is the way that it's wired, the way it's hooked up, actually causes you to think in a particular manner. And it also says that that variation in brains, in the way that they're put together, the way they think, is normal. It's not something weird. That's just like, you know, there's 7-foot people and there's 5-foot people. We consider them all normal. All the different brains are normal. Give you an idea how far apart some brains can be. I tend to get into a kick of what I eat, and I got into this kick on this particular potato bread. So we'd go into the grocery store, and each week I'd be looking up and down the aisle, and my wife would immediately go, "It's right over there, honey." And I'd walk over and get the bread. This went on a year and a half, and I finally had to ask her, "How do you find that bread so darn fast? You beat me every time." And she said, "I just look for the orange circle that's on the end of the label." I've been trying to read the words the entire time, up and down the damn aisle reading words. She just looks for an orange circle. A lot better way to process in this case. I have a term that I refer to as ASD listers. And these are going to be people that I think you're going to recognize. And to me, what an ASD lister is somebody who demonstrates many of the traits that are associated with a person on the autism spectrum, but would not necessarily be clinically diagnosed. In other words, if you were to take all the geeks and techies and all those kind of people you have and throw them in a room with a bunch of people on the spectrum, you probably couldn't tell them apart. Now, the amazing thing about the ASD listers is they're like having a Hollywood A-lister. If you want to have a blockbuster film, what do you have to have? You got to have an A-lister star in it, or it don't happen. If you want to have a super project that excels, guess what you got to have? You got to have an ASD lister or a couple of them on your team to get that innovation. So once I was diagnosed with Asperger's, I started seeing these ASD listers everywhere. I saw them in the department I was working at. I saw them when I thought back to companies I'd worked at previously. I saw them there. I even saw them in departments that weren't tech departments. Some of them even were managers, believe it or not. And I'm not the only one that noticed them everywhere. These companies are just a small example who have actually gone and created programs specifically to recruit, to train, and to retain people that are on the ASD lister spectrum. And they do it under this Autism at Work moniker. And It's really just a forum for sharing ideas of how they've implemented and done these different things. It's not a turnkey approach that you can just drop in automatically. The great part about it is they've proven through actually university research that it has positive ROI, it increases innovation, and it increases retention. So just think, if you could get your IT people to stay an extra 2 months, what would that be worth in the long run with your departments? These are just some of the different methods that different companies have applied in the different areas to go from recruitment all the way through retention. Not all companies need that. Maybe you don't want to recruit, but you certainly know that you've got some people that maybe if you supported them better, they'd stay around and work a little harder. So what are some common signs? Common signs with ASD listers is often you won't have eye contact when they're speaking with you. They might be looking down, they might be looking to the side. They're not paying attention to anything else. They're just not looking at you while they're fully engaged in that conversation. Another very common thing is the infamous no filter. Okay, so how many of you here have had somebody that reports underneath you that ends up in HR because they said something? Yep, I'm guilty of that one. And then we often miss voice and body cues. And one that you're probably really familiar with is you're talking to one of your tech people and it's been a little bit and you need to get going, you got things to do and you're turning and you're doing towards the door and you're doing everything you can to get the idea across that you got to go. And what do? They keep going and going and going and going and going and going and you cannot stop them. If you run into these three things together, you're probably dealing with an ASD lister. There's other things too, and by no means is this clinical at all. But it will definitely give you an idea that maybe you should think of how you're going to deal with them, how you're going to approach them, because they're probably thinking through a different mindset than you likely are. So what are 3 tricks to engage ASD listers as your STEM talent? No, it's not those things. If you want to start a frat house, that's a great thing to get. If you want to run an IT department, guess what? Some of us can give a crap about that stuff. I'm going to explain to you 3 different approaches that I think you will find will help you as you deal with some of the people in your technical staffs that fall into my ASD listers. And the first one quickly is this concept of 3 degrees of interest. What 3 degrees of interest says is that at any time, in any place, on any subject, any particular person is going to have a different level that they're interested in. And I start out with the lowest levels being like a user story, where it's like the social, what do you do for work? And then we move up in complexity, which is like doing requirements. We've got to get a little more detailed, we've got to dig into a little bit more technology, but we're not building anything yet except requirements. And then we get the deepest level of interest would be that code, that implementation level. And that is where your technical people are living. That's where their heads are, that's where they're thinking, that's where they live. What this is showing us is how do you address people that are at the different levels of interest? Well, if you're talking to somebody who's at the user level interest, guess what you would use? You'd use a story, just like we call it user story for some reason. And you would convey the information more in a story format. I mean, if you're thinking about socially, you would convey it more of a story. On the other hand, when you get down to the implementation and the code level, at that point, you better be talking technology and tech and not telling funny stories anymore. So the big takeaway here is recognize there's 3 distinct levels. Clarify that before you have the discussion. If you're talking with a business person, say, hey, we're going to talk at a business level. End of story. You go out of business, I'm going to cut you off. And it tells you how to address whatever area you decide is appropriate. Another thing is, do not ask to multitask. Okay, we keep doing it over and over again. Studies have been done time after time. We suck at it. There's almost no human that performs better multitasking than single tasking. But we keep trying it. But guess what? Us ASD listers, we really are bad at it. So never give things out in parallel. And if for some reason, God forbid, you actually have to give out multiple things at the same time, make the priorities crystal clear. make sure that they know, if this one can't be completed for some reason, do this instead. And guess what? You get the work done that you actually want done, and you got people that are happy because they know how to please you now. This is a killer, too many choices. Okay, have any of you ever asked your technical people to say, what do you think? And what happens? Well, you either get a one-word answer, right, or you get an answer that never ends. We all know, though, in any organization, in any situation, in any type of project we're doing, there's already some things that have limitations on it. Maybe we have a license with Oracle. Maybe we don't have a license with Oracle. Well, if we don't, we're probably not going to go from a Microsoft shop to an Oracle shop over one project. So why even let it be on the table? Why not just lay it out this way and say, we could do this because we have licenses, we could do this because we have some skill sets in that area, and this one is a potential because it's an area we want to move to. Guess what? Won't you get a lot better decision and input from your people than if you just say, what do you think we should do? And they come up with language like, it should be Rust, it should be this, it should be that. Limit them, and by doing that, you'll ask the right question, and you'll get the right answer. And we happen to have the question asking expert sitting here that's going to tell us about more of that stuff. Oh, why was I fired? I was fired because I had a meltdown. And I was working in a situation that was highly parallel, that had no priorities whatsoever, and a meltdown was simply I was being pulled in so many directions at the same time that cognitively I could not process the emotions. And when you're on the spectrum, when that happens, your brain basically shuts down. You are not there present in a cognitive basis, and it gets kind of nasty at times. The worst part about it is virtually no company knows how to deal with it or handle it. And it's a common symptom. And even worse, autism's covered under ADA. You should be accommodating it. So, to wrap up quickly, first off, I think we recognize that there's different ways to think, and that this diversity of processing gives us better processes sometimes, and better processes at other times, a different method. So remember, there's a very wide range. Try and get the right person that has the right thought process. ASD listers are often your best performers. I think we all know that. Sometimes it's our most troublesome people that are our most brilliant also. Major companies are proactively out trying to recruit from this segment. And I think I gave you 3 golden nuggets there. And if you take those 3 things back tomorrow and actually start using them with your people and your team, I think you're going to see a little difference in communication just from those 3 little tips. Oh, I will back up one here. There we go. Okay. Fast on the trigger here. What's the challenges? The challenges are, like implementing anything, is your company set up to implement change? And again, we got the change expert with us, so great group. And you need C-suite support. If you don't get buy-in from the top, they ain't going to buy it down here, period. And you need to find a specialist who actually knows Asperger's, not like went to school and studied about people that have it, but has lived it, combined with knowing business and knowing technology. Because if you don't know both sides and know what the experience is, how do you bring it all together? Well, this is my chance for my little plug that I get to slip in. What I do is I actually help companies do that and bring together the different sides and teach tech to communicate with non-tech, teach non-tech to communicate with tech, help set up programs completely through if you want to do full recruitment, help train managers, variety of different things. And including I have online courses. And as a little gift here, if you want, or jot that down or write it down, there's an online course that's for free, and it's about communicating with the technical, the people you're dealing with every day. And yes, unfortunately, Bitly, I think, is on Linux, and those do have to be capital in the end or they don't work. So that's the end.
Thanks, Tim.
Any questions real quick or? Cool.
That's great. That's great.
Thank you.
Are you working with the specialist Stern folks that are in town?
I can tell you some really interesting stories that probably would be better not in the whole group. But I'm actually working very closely with a gentleman from the Department of Labor, actually vocational rehab, who, yeah, Steve, yeah. Let's just say that there's been some changes in the scenery and people are moving back to Europe. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
You had mentioned on one of your slides about that there are state resources and funding. Can you say a little bit more about that would be covered?
This is where it starts getting a little creative. And when I say getting a little creative, it takes, first off, you've got to find somebody in the state who wants to work with you. Okay, you know, we've all dealt with bureaucrats at times. You got to find somebody that cares. They're there. And then secondly, you've got to be willing to be a little bit flexible and recognize that states don't move as fast as companies tend to move. It can take 2 or 3 months to get there. But there's essentially two different sides to what they're willing to help put funding behind. One side is what they call the incumbent worker program. And that's where essentially you say, if these people had this skill, I could give them an advancement or they could move up or whatever. If you can prove it would give them a job opportunity, they can probably figure out some way to put some money around it, particularly if it has a hard skill aspect. They don't like to finance soft skills because that's the way we wrote the laws for some reason. Unfortunately, that's where we need the most help, but that is available. The other side is more of a longer term of helping build out almost apprenticeship type programs to be able to bring in and help people learn the software industry using the old techniques of we used to learn all different types of industries. It's really funny when you think about it. How did most of your best programmers probably learn to do what they do? Yeah, it wasn't the college they went to. They knew before they even got there. They stayed up late at night and they learned it. So it's getting those people into some kind of career path because maybe they're not college people, but they're brilliant and they can program, or they know electronics and can do IoT stuff. So the best thing would be get a hold of me and I can help get you connected and kind of get the conversation started, and from there you take it where it goes.
Tim, how does this align with agile development methodology?
Well, that's a good question. Agile is probably about the worst thing you could do to somebody on the autism spectrum. Flat out, period. What is the number one, you know, and I don't think any of you are autism experts. Well, I know some of you are a little bit, but most of you aren't autism experts. So, but from your standpoint, what do you think is the most prevalent issue people have that are on the spectrum? Social interaction. So what do we do in Agile every day? Stand them up first thing in the morning, piss them off, and then send them back to their desk and hope we're going to get good work. Wow, that made a lot of sense. How about an email to the Scrum Master that they read for them instead? Think that would work? So real simple things could be done. Agile by itself, I personally like Agile, so I'm not anti-Agile. I'm just saying there's lots of things that are built into Agile that are demanding resources out of these people that are not resources that they own. But is a written response of what I did yesterday, what hung me up, and what I'm doing today going to work just as well as if I speak it in front of the group? Anything else? Cool. If anybody wants, I'm hanging out for the whole play, so afterwards just grab me and yeah, definitely can connect up and we'll get you connected up.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.